guys? Happy New Year and welcome back to another video. I just found out that I recently passed my national certification exam, which means that I'm officially a certified athletic therapist. In preparation for the exam, I felt myself lost and confused as far as how to study and what specifically to study. So I want to draw on my experience and show you guys the steps I took in order to pass the national certification exam. Make sure that you guys stick to the end of the video for everything to tie together because all of these tips are connected to one another and I want you guys to be best prepared going into the exam. Tip number one is study the Foundations of Athletic Therapy textbook. This book is the #1 guide that I would use to cover all your bases for your preparation going into the exam. This is the book that all the professors and all the previous students that have taken the exam recommend. So this is your #1 best bet when it comes to preparation. For those of you that are residing outside of Canada, I'm not sure what the specific textbook that is directly related to the exam, so I would look into that. I know there's an athletic trainer that's made a video on this, so I'll link his video in the description down below, but just make sure that you look into that because it's super important. As far as how to study an entire textbook, you have to find what works best for you. What I did personally was I looked at the beginning of the textbook and I looked at how many sections there were and I divided it up accordingly. So I think there was about 6 sections in the entire book. So I took 1 week to finish one section and I set that intention for myself. When you do it that way, an 1,000-page textbook doesn't seem nearly as daunting. In total, I gave myself 2 months to prepare. So the first 5-6 weeks was used to go through the book, highlight, make any notes, and then the last 2-3 weeks was used to do revision, look at any elements that I feel like I wasn't comfortable with. At that point, I felt ready. In total, in this 8 weeks of preparation, I would say that I studied about anywhere between 8 to 12 hours every single week. For me personally, I decided to read the entire textbook. As I previously said, I wanted to cover my bases, but I know that looking at a whole textbook page and just a whole textbook in general can seem very overwhelming. So what I'm gonna do is I'm gonna give you guys a piece of my mindset when I look at a page and kind of what information I take away and what information I throw away. Here's a section in the book where it talks about compartment syndrome. Here, I'm trying to look at what are the key points and I'm trying to put myself in the perspective of the tester, asking questions like what can they ask me on this particular page? What detail can they point out potentially that can throw me off? And doing this really has helped me as I study. Don't fixate on knowing every single detail throughout the book. Make note of it and move on. It's just going to stress you out if you try to memorize every single thing. Knowing the specific details, there's a time and place for that, and I'll get to that later on in the video, and that's where test banks come in. As far as note-taking, you have to do what works for you. Me personally, what I did was I created 2 different documents. I created a Word document which basically had summary points for each chapter, and then I created an Excel spreadsheet which looked at both the conditions and all the tests. And I basically just created different columns for that, listed all of them out in a very shortened version. I had a friend that created a bank of cue cards, but for me personally, that's just way too time consuming. But if that works for you, go for it. Creating these 2 documents serves 2 purposes. One, it allows me to look at a revised version of all the notes throughout the book and basically review that a couple weeks prior to the exam. And number 2, it serves as a long-term tool as a new grad, as a growing athletic therapist, to review those notes and constantly have it in one section. Tip number 2 is using a study group. For me personally, I decided to do the majority of my studying alone because that's what works for me, which comes down to self-awareness and just knowing yourself. But I knew that a study group would be effective, and for that reason, I did choose to do some of my time doing that. There's 2 main reasons why I decided to do a study group. The first reason is accountability. So holding myself accountable, knowing that we have to review a specific chapter or review a set of questions from a test bank, let's say, really helped push me and really helped to ensure that we got the most out of our time together studying in a group. The second reason is that studying with a group keeps you motivated, especially for me because during the time that I was studying, it's during COVID, so it's very challenging for a lot of us to get going, to stay motivated, and studying with a group, studying with other people just really helps to keep yourself consistent and keep you going with your study schedule. Another thing that kept me going was knowing that if I failed this exam, it would have cost me another $700 to $800, and not only that, I wouldn't be able to work for the next 6 months. So that was definitely something that kept me motivated and kept me going. Tip number 3 is using or purchasing a test bank. This is probably one of the most effective strategies that I used in preparation for my exam. I ended up coming across a test bank in one of the Facebook groups that I'm in, and I split it between a few of my friends, so it only came out to about $20. But what I would recommend as far as the specifics of a test bank is ensuring that it correlates as closely as possible with the material in the textbook so you can reference it in the answers of the test bank. So this is basically what the test bank looks like. Basically what I did here was I went through all the chapters and I just tried to answer the questions to the best of my ability. When I stumbled on a question that was more challenging, I just referenced it in the book and I made sure to highlight in the book so that it would put extra attention on that point and then I could remember it moving forward. The power of using something like a test bank is that it really emphasizes these specific details and really forces you to give that extra attention towards these things instead of normally something that you probably would have just overlooked when skimming through the book. The fourth and final tip is learn as much as you can throughout your entire school experience. Now this is probably something that is going to be very overlooked because it seems like a very general and basic and throwaway tip, but I would argue that this is probably one of the most, if not the most important thing that eventually goes into your preparation for this national exam. For me personally, I'm always someone that asks a lot of questions and seeks a lot of answers. So since I was doing this throughout my 5 years in university, it really enabled me to improve my critical thinking skills and it improved my overall knowledge base. So through this, I think that was one of the critical reasons why I was eventually able to pass this national exam. The more you are able to take an appreciation towards athletic therapy as a whole, ask questions and seek answers, the more knowledge base you will have, and then eventually that will help you towards your national exam. When combining this with the proper preparation as far as textbook, the test bank, and the group studying, your chances of passing are very high. Here are the key takeaways. Make sure that you read the book, Foundations of Athletic Therapy. Make sure you plan out your study schedule at least 2 months before the exam time. Make sure that you leave the last 2-3 weeks for the revision and going over anything that you feel uncomfortable with. And make sure that you find the form of note-taking that works best for you. The next point is to make sure that you use a test bank. Try to find a test bank that is as close to the textbook content as possible, and make sure that you use these test banks to point out the details within the textbook that you would have overlooked just skimming it. The third tip was study groups. For that piece, the main points are accountability and motivation. And the last point was learn as much as you can in school. Make sure you're always asking questions and seeking answers. Alright guys, that's pretty much it for the video. I hope you all enjoyed. I hope you found a lot of value from it. I really tried to think about what I learned throughout this whole experience and provide that value back to you guys, and I hope you can take that into eventually when you write the national exam. So let me know what you guys want to see from me in the future. I have a lot of great content coming up, but that's pretty much it for now guys. Thanks.